Hi, my name is Alex Lopchev. I'm making this video on Sam Harris's opinions on torture because of the 2004 TYT interview. I've obviously had this kicking around in my head for a long time, and well, that's why I make this video. It's been up there, and I've been yelling about it in my head for a long fucking time, you guys. So we're gonna kind of go with, this is gonna be a little bit in a list. I'm gonna be reading kind of my prepped remarks that are almost like a, essay style. So I will be going to what I wrote about this, and then turning back to the camera, adding whatever, I'm gonna add that blah 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 blah. Oh, I should also apologize. I'm sorry about the humming. I do photography for a living. These are like model lights, and they have to cool down, so there's gonna be a hum. So this is the first thing that got me interested in actually doing this video. Is in the TYT interview, Sam Harris says, "I think torture should be illegal across the board." Now I thought to myself, well, if someone says that, torture should be legal across the board, and then they're having like a philosophical sort of in this case, torture, in this case, torture should be allowed. Torture is actually moral. If someone is just bringing forward the conversation in that sense, why would anyone have a problem? Why would this be a problem for anyone? So I decided to, start reading about this. So, number one, I think torture should be illegal across the board. I know that's not a good way to use quotes, but whatever. Anyways, this is the first time Sam has said this in all his dialogue about torture. So in his, here, let me get done with this paragraph before I start bullshitting. He has never mentioned it in his article in defense of torture, or even in the longer form chapter on the subject in The End of Faith. He has supported torture in print, the torture of KSM for instance. At best, he is saying things completely incongruent with his original arguments and stances. At worst, he is deliberately misleading people to his actual stances in a damage control style. Now, in the TYT interview, he does say, it's true that some of my opinions on this had to be fleshed out. I think that he is trying to subtly put this under that category. Although I never said this, I've never been in support of torture. I've always wanted it to be illegal. We're going to go through all of what he said in his most substantive work on torture, and we're going to show that that's absolutely either incongruent with his actual stances. It's completely incongruent with his actual stances to say torture should be illegal. Okay, And he never said it. So we will also judge the pieces in it of themselves. Because he can't just keep putting out like patches, oh, this is my stance on torture 3.1, this 3.2, blah, blah, blah. That's also kind of not okay as a writer. You can apologize to it and then I should have been more clear, but he also is not really doing that. Okay, anyways. Number two, we already know he has a bomb argument, the ticking bomb argument that Sam makes in The End of Faith. So now I'm going to read from page 194 of The End of Faith. It is curious that while the torture of Osama bin Laden himself could be expected to provoke convulsions of conscience among our leaders, the unintended, though perfectly foreseeable and therefore accepted slaughter of children does not. So now we ask, if we are willing to act in a way that guarantees the misery and death of some considerable number of innocent children, why spare the rod with suspected terrorists? It matters that he says suspected. See, this is why I should read. I'll get to it. I should be reading the paragraphs that I wrote first, because in a second I'll say the exact same thing. It's important that he says suspected here. Anyways. Sorry, I'm not good at this. It is almost comical here that Sam seems incapable of conceiving people who are both against torture and against the murder of innocent children via bombing. The use of the word suspected is also a problem, as we will see in a second. In his Huffington Post article titled "In Defense of Torture," Sam changes the word suspected to known. So instead of saying, why spare the rod with suspected terrorists, he says, why spare the rod with known terrorists. It seems, when he was adapting the chapter on torture from The End of Faith, Sam saw that the word suspected would be a problem because it is not congruent with the idea we already know he has a bomb. He also uses an example of justified torture that took place in Australia. This story of justified torture in Australia goes this way. There was a man in Australia that kidnapped a child and left her in a car. He was caught, but the car wasn't at the scene. Here we have the ticking bomb, the child dying in the car. The cops, when they caught the man, knew that he was the kidnapper. This is the case that the criminal... This is why the word suspected is not congruent. In this example, we know the kidnapper... we know that he's the kidnapper. The kid's not with him. So we know that he's gonna... we know that he's gonna have the last location of the child where we can find the child. The child's in a hot-ass car. And then we... the child's not gonna die if we do this. This is also why, in this case, you can more easily make the case that the criminal should have been tortured. He knew where the kid was. There is no risk of inadvertently torturing an innocent person. Now, that last quote, inadvertently torturing an innocent person, that's from Sam. We're going to get to that in a second. Let me see if I have anything to say about this. I think I've pretty much covered it. We're not really talking about a person that, we're sure that he had the kid. We were sure that he knew about the whereabouts of the kid. The cops beat the shit out of him, or whatever the fuck. He told them the location. They found the kid in the car. The kid didn't die. Okay. This is about as benevolent of an example of torture as you can find. Okay. So Sam uses this to kind of argue for torture, but then the examples that he gives are not congruent at all. He goes on to say. Sam goes on to say, what is the difference between pursuing a course of action where we run the risk of inadvertently subjecting some innocent men to torture and pursuing one in which we inadvertently kill greater numbers of innocent men, women, and children? Rather, it seems obvious that the misapplication of torture, he's opening that door. The misapplication of torture should be far less troubling to us than collateral damage. There are, after all, no infants interned at Guantanamo Bay, just rather scrupulous young men, many of whom were caught in the very act of trying to kill our soldiers. I want to say something real quick that I actually don't have in here. He uses the word scrupulous in the book. This is End of Faith page 194 again. In the Huffington Post article titled "In Defense of Torture," he does not use the word scrupulous. Now, what does scrupulous mean? It's a way of saying like dirty and like I don't know, let's say disheveled, maybe like disease-ridden, like just sort of like someone that's like like a homeless person could be described as scrupulous. The other meaning of the word scrupulous is to say morally dirty. Okay, so that's all tied into one thing. He takes that out. He takes that out in the Huffington Post article. I think it's kind of obvious why. It could be for time, so let's leave that door open. For me, Sam's subtle propagandist, kind of the way that he is, I think that he saw that this would not be the right word to use at a mass audience. When you're by that time, I think that article came out in 2005. There were stories of innocent men, and you can't call them scrupulous. When the left at that time would have fucking crucified you. Which, I mean, they did a good job at that time of pegging him. Okay. Give me 1 second. So now we're gonna go to what I have to say about that last paragraph. Should I reread the paragraph? Let's do that. It goes on to say, what is the difference between pursuing a course of action where we run the risk of inadvertently subjecting some innocent men to torture and pursuing one in which we inadvertently kill far greater numbers of innocent men, women, and children? Rather, it seems obvious that the misapplication of torture should be far less troubling to us than collateral damage. There are, after all, no infants interned at Guantanamo, just rather scrupulous young men, many of whom were caught in the very act of trying to kill our soldiers. Okay. So, this is me now writing about that paragraph. This paragraph develops his argument for the use of torture further. He is saying, since we are okay with the collateral damage of bombing, which kills innocent children, we should be okay with the collateral damage of torture, aka torturing innocent men. This makes his entire argument that there is a ticking bomb, so we must torture to find that less people die, pointless. We know he is comfortable with the inescapable torture of innocent men. This argument, it seems to me, only makes sense when you are taking for granted that you will torture innocent men in a systemized torture setting. Notice also that he has never had an argument, in print at least, that the torture program in Guantanamo was a problem. The only torture I have seen him denounce is that happened in Abu Ghraib. But that torture was often without utility. I would think the tortures in Abu Ghraib were like people stacking into human pyramids naked Iraqi men with green sacks over their head, okay? They were doing this shit for fucking fun, okay? So that's what I mean, torture without utility. We're not torturing, we're not building this pyramid of naked men to find out intel, okay? I would think that even the photos of Sabrina Harmon, she's one of the torturers, posing with naked men wearing green sacks over their heads would be okay by Sam's argument. If the torture produced intel which could be used against the enemy to prevent an attack, why would we not do it? Let me repeat that again. I would think that even the photos of Sabrina Harmon posing with naked men wearing green sacks over their head would be okay by Sam's argument if it were to provide intel. Now this is me like using like a paraphrase. If the torture, this is me reframing, I shouldn't say paraphrase. If the torture produced intel which could be used against the enemy to prevent an attack, why would we not do it? After all, there are no children in Abu Ghraib. Just rather, scrupulous young men, many of whom were caught trying to kill our soldiers. From what we have read so far, would you disagree with that? So here's what I'm saying there. I think that it's entirely justifiable by Sam's writing to say, well, we're killing children. We're killing children, and if we're not, why would we have a problem with making pyramids of naked men? If it was to actually prosecute our war on terror. Why would we have a problem with that if it was giving us intel? We wouldn't, by Sam's logic. Like I said, do you disagree? I mean, to be honest, this is one of the points that I've just in the past couple of days wrote. So I'm not exactly 100% on it, but I think I'm 100% on it. Anyways, whatever. So next point. Enter colleague Sheikh, this is from End of Faith, page 197. Enter colleague Sheikh Mohammed, our most valuable capture on the War on Terror. Here is a character actually cut from Dershowitzian cloth. Okay. Sam supports the use of waterboarding for KSM. This is another notch, this is me now. This is another notch against his newly found stance, or maybe I should say newly espoused stance, that he wants torture to be illegal across the board. There have been many foiled terror plots attributed to intel found from the torture of KSM. From what I've read, most of those have been found to be attributed incorrectly to him based on the Senate torture report. I should say here that the Senate torture report came out a few months after Sam's interview with TYT, so he might not have gotten that information. I don't know if that information was out before that. Anyways. More importantly, we need to turn to his "we already know he has a bomb" argument. Well, for KSM, we didn't know he has a ticking bomb. You could reasonably say that we had great reason to think that a high-level Al-Qaeda leader would know of ongoing terror plots. This, though, is different from "we already know he has a bomb." Once again, these are incongruent things. Okay, it doesn't matter. You don't have to make the "we already know he has a bomb" point. When you're talking about this, you could say about any anybody that we capture that we think is a terrorist, we can make an argument for torturing them. And here I'll give you some. I'll give you the actual the chances that Sam is willing to take. So Sam makes this point in defense of torture that based on how high of an operative he is, he would more than likely know about an Al-Qaeda bombing that was to come up, and that's why we should torture him. To reiterate his point, based on how high in the Al-Qaeda hierarchy this guy is, we should expect to be able to torture him and get information on an ongoing plot, which we could stop so as to save lives. Maybe. Okay, so this is not a "we know he has a bomb." He later goes on to say that, given what we are willing to do to innocent children, it seems perverse not to torture KSM. It seems to Sam, in fact, that if there is a 1 in 1 million chance to find anything we could use, we should use every means at our disposal. Page 198, End of Faith. That's not a direct quote. That's me paraphrasing. Here, though, we see that pointing to the extreme does not make an argument against our use of systemized torture, meaning that this is about as justified of a torture as you can get without actually knowing of an ongoing plot. So we to go back to the Australia example, we know that this motherfucker has put babies in cars before and they've died. We've just caught him. And that we can reasonably think that he might know of ongoing baby in car plots. Okay, so this is using like just about the most extreme case that you can, without actually knowing of the babies in hot cars, without actually knowing the name of the baby. Blah blah blah. Okay. Anyways. Let me restart. Here, though, we see that pointing to the extreme does not make an argument against our use of systemized torture. This argument actually reminds me of an argument of people who are pro-choice use. Now, I'm actually pro-choice for a bunch of reasons, but I will just tell you kind of a pointless argument that I think people that are pro-choice make. They make the argument, well, what about in the cases of rape and incest? At the same time, the same pro-choice people will have a harder line that encompasses those rape and incest cases. And that harder line is, I can use abortion because it's my body and I have autonomy over my body. These sort of people need not make the rape and incest argument for this reason, because you're already covering those cases. Okay, you're already covering those cases. This is kind of like a pointless, not pointless, but this is just an argument that does not need to be made. In the same way, we don't need to consider Sam's point about KSM unless his support of torture was limited to these extreme cases, which it's not. What Sam doesn't do at all is actually talk. He doesn't denounce our most famous at the time torture facility, which is Guantanamo. Even in the article in Defense of Torture, which is his 2.0 from his book. Okay, so the In Defense of Torture, the Huffington Post article, is his version 2.0 of his argument. What he says in that is one of the things that he says is, I'm one of the people that has argued for the necessity of torture in our prosecution of the war on terror. Okay, like I think there's no doubt in my mind that at that time he was 100% for an actual torture program, including waterboarding. Okay. KSM, for instance, was waterboarded some hundreds of times, and that's the example that he's choosing to use. So there is no doubt that he's doing damage control here. In his 3.0 conversation with Cenk Uygur, where he says that torture should be illegal across the board. No, sorry, Sam, can't do that. Here's another thing that pisses me off about his 3.0 conversation. In that TYT article, or in that TYT interview rather, torture is not always torture. For some of these guys, torturing is putting a Quran in blood, or smearing a Quran in menstrual blood. I forget the actual, it doesn't sound like I have it right here. But he's saying torture to some of these guys is putting the Quran in, menstrual blood. Okay. Well, sorry Sam, but we've already seen that you support torture, namely waterboarding KSM. Also, we have already seen you be willing to take the risk of torturing the innocent in your "it's less bad than killing or injuring innocent" argument. Sam bringing up that to some of these guys torture is dipping a Quran in menstrual blood is very disingenuous. We know you support real torture, namely waterboarding. Sorry I have to repeat myself, but whatever. Now here's why this matters. Number 4. Sam makes tricky remarks about torture. This is from In the End of Faith, page 193. Imagine that a known terrorist has planted a large bomb in the heart of a nearby city. This man now sits in your custody. As to the bomb's location, you will say nothing except that the site was chosen to produce maximum loss of life. Given this state of affairs, in particular, given that there is still time to prevent the imminent atrocity, it seems there would be no harm in dusting off the strappado and exposing this unpleasant fellow to a suasion of bygone times. Now, a strappado is a genuine torture device, okay? Medieval torture. This is when they have your arms tied in the back, and then they basically lift you by your arms. This is actually, if I'm not mistaken, this is what happened to Senator McCain. You're basically held up by your arms in the back, and your muscles are fucking just, you know, your sockets are broken and blah blah blah. I had a teacher, Mr. Armbrust, in my junior high, that told us about that, and he said that, you know, John McCain still can't like lift his arms up or something. I don't know if that's true, but Mr. Armbrust was a good man. 8th grade social studies. So here we have Sam talking about a strappado. Now, don't worry, we're gonna be charitable with Sam. Okay, so now I'm gonna go back to reading. So here we have a torture method Sam might be willing to consider, although I am inclined to think that he is making a joke. That being said, the use of a strappado is congruent with his line about KSM that we should use every means of our disposal, even at 1 in 1,000,000th odds. Okay, so either way, based on his writings, it actually is congruent to use a strappado. Every means at our disposal, 1 in 1,000,000th odds. The every means in our disposal is the actual important part here. To get said terrorist talking. Sorry, I'm just finishing up the sentence. There are two interpretations that we could use here. The charitable interpretation of Sam's writing is that he is flippantly making jokes about serious things. That's the charitable interpretation. The uncharitable interpretation is that Sam is okay with the use of strappados. Both are a problem. The former being bad writing, the latter a support of a medieval type of torture. Maybe not bad writing, but just, I don't know. We'll get back to that. But let's not be humorless. Sam might be joking, so let's comment on just why this irreverence is a problem. Even if Sam isn't willing to use a strappado, we must take into account that we have used strappados in our prosecution on the war on terror. One case is that of Ahmed Rabbani, a former taxi driver from Pakistan, now Guantanamo Bay prisoner. He was sold to the CIA by the ISI. That's Pakistani intelligence, by the way. The CIA, which spent more than 500 days with Rabbani, tortured him with a strappado. He is currently on hunger strike and weighs less than 100 pounds. He is on death's door. If you want to find out more about this story, look for a piece done by Democracy Now! On the subject. It's a very heartbreaking piece. I mean, this is a guy that, taxi driver, and I want to say Karachi. But, they tortured the shit out of him. He's less than 100 pounds. I think he's like 90 pounds. He's on death's door. He's having hallucinations from not eating food. It's a really fucking sad case. And, these stories have been coming out for years and years and years and years and years and years. Alright. Going back to my writing. Knowing this, Sam's use of that word, what word am I talking about here? Oh, strappado. Sam's use of that word is reframed as less than charmingly cheeky. This man's incarceration and torture recasts Sam's comments as heartless and uninformed. Let me repeat. This is the charitable interpretation. It is interesting that while these stories, and there are many stories of innocent people being detained at Guantanamo. Many. It's, excuse me. Let me grab another drink real quick. My throat's scratching. It is interesting that while these stories, and there are many, have come out for over a decade now, Sam doesn't talk about them. Not that I have seen, at least. This is a case in point about Sam's style of writing, where he often doesn't take into consideration real-life examples. Let me reread that sentence. This is a case in point about how Sam's style of writing, where he often doesn't take into consideration real-life examples, is extremely flawed. I've got bad syntax and fucking grammar. I'm Bulgarian, you guys. I've never done well in school. I've got really bad syntax and grammar. Anyways, to that last point of Sam not using real life examples. today I was listening to his interview with Kyle Kalinske, his appearance on Kyle's show, and because I want to brush up on it. He says one really obnoxious thing to Kyle. The last 30 minutes of that appearance are actually extremely obnoxious to me. And one of the things that he says is they talk about Dick Cheney and comparing Dick Cheney to, I guess, Osama bin Laden. And the analogy that Sam makes about Dick Cheney and the Iraq War is, well, imagine that you're a sniper. Sam's always asking people to imagine shit. Imagine all the snipers. Anyways, imagine you're a sniper, and the sniper, there's a hostage, or imagine there is a sniper, and there's a hostage and a bad guy, and the sniper takes his shot, and then he, kills the hostage instead. Well, that's a matter of intention. Why would we prosecute? That's fucking insane to say about, to compare that to Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney isn't imagining that he's helping people. These people, have been fucking up for years and years. They've been killing the fucking hostage every time. Okay? It's fucking insane to make that comparison. It's so stupid. It's just, I can't even, that'll probably be my next video, okay? Let me make one more point about the Kyle Kalinske thing. At one point, Kyle talks to him about how his 2.0 version, or I guess 3.0 version, response to controversy version of his what he said on torture is more reasonable. And Sam does some serious fucking subtle propaganda. First he goes, well, you read The End of Faith, right? And that went down smoothly for you? Okay. So you didn't have a problem there, and that's my longest form. Which if right now, if Kyle was to read The End of Faith, I'm sure he'd have a problem with it. He just said that he read The End of Faith and he doesn't feel like attacking you on it. Anyways, but at one point he says about the chapter on torture in The End of Faith that it was 1 or 2 pages in The End of Faith. It's not true. It's not true. And that's just how Sam has this subtle little propagandistic way. I have no doubt in my mind that Sam knows exactly how many pages there are. This is him kind of saying oh, well, it's much ado about nothing, or how the fuck the saying goes. This is you guys are making a big deal out of 2 pages. No, motherfucker. It's first of all, it's 13 pages long. I want to say it's 11 to 13 pages long. I had it off the top of my head a long time ago. I've been thinking about making this video for 4 years, so some of this information was lost, but I did count it at one point, and yes, it's 10 plus for sure. I'm gonna guess 13. Fact check me, internet. Sorry, I'm scratching my foot. Hi again. My camera stopped the video short at 30 minutes, so I cut off a little bit, and I'm just going to glue this to the end of it. Thank you for watching my video. If you watched it, if you didn't, whatever, fuck you, but I want to do more of these videos. I might do more of these videos, I should say. I wanted to really do one on Sam Cedar because he is obnoxious to me like nobody else, and that would just be a funny video essentially, because to me Sam is whatever. But I think most of them have to be about Sam Harris. I think I have to put out 3 or 4 on Sam Harris just to cover how much I hate his what he says about foreign policy and how much of an apologist he is against aggressive American foreign policy. That's the word to use. He's an apologist for an aggressive American foreign policy. So I think that's what I have to do. And if you listen to the last 30 minutes of his interview with Kyle Kalinske, one of the things, like I said, that he says is, he compares Dick Cheney to a sniper that accidentally shoots a child when he meant to shoot a killer. That's stupid. That's just stupid. That's just stupid. And eventually you gotta ask yourself, where the fuck is this dude aiming when all they're doing is hitting the child? Every time the sniper hits the child, every time, Sam. Every fucking time, Sam. Anyways. So I don't know, I just wanted to say that. I might do more of these videos, and a bunch of them are going to be on Sam. At least the first few. They have to be about Sam. I have to be very careful about talking about Sam, because Sam is the boy who cried misquote. So, I say the boy who cried misquote, but I don't think a lot of you are seeing it that way. I think a lot of you are seeing, it's like, shit, wolves are coming, every single time he says it. Anyways, so, thank you. Thank you for watching this video if you watched it. If you got only part way through it, you can't see me say this right now, but thank you. And war's fucking shitty. How's that for an ending? Fuck war. Fuck war. It's the biggest, most important fucking thing we can fight against is war. So hey, war, if you're out there, fuck you. Fuck war. Cheers.